Jackson Ward stood near the edge of the steel platform, the air around him heavy with silence, except for the hum of the prison ship's engines. The room was cold and full of shadow, and the smell of metal and fear mixed in his lungs across from him. In the center of the circular arena knelt the alien warrior, the one they all came to watch die. Her name was Sarana, but the guards never used it. They just called her a prisoner. Her hands were bound with energy, cuffs glowing red, and her head was lowered. But her back was straight and proud. She did not beg. She did not cry. She looked like a storm ready to explode, but frozen in chains. Jackson had been in many war zones, but something about this felt wrong. He had read her file. She was a Zyral warrior, said to be ruthless, responsible for dozens of human deaths. She was caught during a mission deep behind human lines. They said she had slaughtered an entire outpost, but there were no witnesses left, just one report from a single general who survived. With a burn on his arm and hatred in his eyes, the lights above flickered, and the execution officer stepped forward with a plasma lance. Jackson felt his jaw tighten. Something was off. Sarana raised her eyes, and for the first time he saw them. Clearly bright like twin galaxies, filled not with hate, but something else, something like pain, and a question why. Jackson shifted his grip on his rifle, sweat forming behind his neck under the armor. He remembered what the captain said before the mission. Just observe, do not interfere. But his fingers twitched and his heart raced. Like a warning bell screaming in his chest, the officer raised the weapon. It crackled blue with deadly charge, and stepped close to Sarana. She did not move. She only looked at Jackson for one brief moment, and in that second, he saw something like trust in her eyes. Not for humans, not for war, but maybe for him. Jackson stepped forward, his voice dry. Stop. The officer froze for a second, confused, but then sneered. Step back, soldier, or you will join her. Jackson raised his rifle and pointed it not at Sarana, but at the officer. The entire room tensed. Weapons were drawn. Voices shouted. The executioner laughed. Traitor. Jackson didn't blink, his hands steady, his voice louder. I said, stop. She didn't get a trial. This is not justice. This is cover-up. The other guards looked at each other, unsure of what to do. One of them raised a gun, but Sarana moved fast. Her legs swept out, catching the guard behind the knee, and he crashed down in the chaos. Jackson fired one stun shot into the ceiling. Lights exploded, smoke and sparks rained down, and in the confusion, he ran to Sarana, pulled her up. Her hands still bound. She looked shocked, but she followed him. No words, just motion, like she had done this 100 times before. They ran through the emergency doors down narrow halls. Alarms began screaming across the ship. Escape in progress. Security breach. Traitor on board. Jackson didn't care. His mind raced, but his steps were firm. Stayed close behind him, her movement graceful, even while injured, even in chains. They ducked into a maintenance shaft, sliding down ladders and crawling through tight vents above them. Boots thundered across metal floors below. Lights searched shadows, but never caught them. Jackson's breath burned, but he kept moving. He reached a hangar door, small and half open. A single fighter rested inside, a two-seater, old but functional. He hacked the lock with his wrist pad, fingers shaking, but fast. The door opened. Sarana paused, looking at him with confusion. Why are you doing this? He did not answer. Instead, he reached for her cuffs, and with a short burst from his tool, he broke them. She stared at him, her hands free, and her voice low. You are one of them. Why help me? He looked at her eyes again, and this time the answer came not in words, but in his silence, in his decision, in his rebellion. They boarded the fighter, the hangar lights flaring red behind them. As soldiers finally found the trail, the engines roared alive as gunfire rang out. One bullet struck near Jackson's arm, but he pulled the lever, and the ship lifted off into black space, away from orders, away from safety. As they left orbit, the computer voice echoed throughout the fleet. Alert, traitor has aided enemy prisoner escape. Jackson Ward is now listed as wanted. Sarana looked at him then, out at the stars, and for the first time her voice was calm. Thank you, but Jackson knew this was only the beginning. Now both of them were alone, hunted and marked, and the galaxy would not forget what he just did. The stolen fighter shook as it pierced through the upper atmosphere, metal groaning with every turn. Jackson gripped the controls with white knuckles, eyes locked on the blinking red warning lights, as behind them the Human Alliance cruiser loomed. Like a beast awakened from sleep, Sarana sat beside him, silent, her wounds bleeding into the seat, her breath slow and shallow, but her eyes never closing. Blast rocked the left wing, the fighter spun wildly. Jackson cursed under his breath and yanked the throttle, twisting through the asteroid field ahead. Sharp rocks flew past the canopy as the stars blurred in a tunnel of motion ahead. Two interceptors gave chase, weapons locked, heat signatures rising. Jackson's mind raced like a firestorm. No time to think, only to survive. He tilted the ship into a tight dive, dodging another missile, and pulled hard into a cave carved between two floating rocks. Shields down, fuel low, every second counted. Serana pressed her hand to her side, blood soaking her armor, but still no complaint, no sound, just that same calm burning in her eyes. "You should have left me," she said, voice barely a whisper. Jackson ignored her, rerouting all power to the rear thrusters. He needed distance, a place to hide somewhere. Far from patrol zones, far from orders and betrayals, far from the name Traitor echoing through every channel. They broke from the field and darted into open space, and for a moment, there was silence, just stars blinking like cold watchers in the void. Jackson checked the nav. He found a shadowed moon on the edge of a dead system, low signals, weak surveillance, perfect for disappearing. He landed the ship in a crater of black stone, steam hissing from every panel, alarms fading to quiet. Jackson opened the hatch and cold air slapped his face. He moved fast, pulled Serana out, helped her down onto the ground, her steps unsteady, her hands still red with blood. He ripped open a medpack and patched her side. His movements rough but careful, his heart beating too fast, too slow. She watched him through the pain, her voice softer now. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked again. "Her people killed your people, your commanders trusted you, and you threw it away." Fuma Jackson paused, hands still bloody. He looked into the darkness, not answering for a long time. Then, finally, he spoke. "Maybe I saw something in your eyes, something human, maybe. I got tired of following orders that felt like lies. Maybe I just couldn't watch someone die who didn't deserve it." Serana said nothing, but her eyes softened just slightly, and in that moment they were not soldier and prisoner, not alien and human. Just two fugitives running from a war that no longer made sense. Jackson set up a small shield field around them, blocking heat signatures and masking signals. They camped under a broken wing of the fighter stars above them, like holes in the sky, and the silence now felt too loud. She asked, "What now? Where do we go?" Jackson leaned back and stared upward. "I know. A place, an outlaw station called Crag's Hollow. Not safe, but safer than here, and full of people who hate the Alliance more than we do. If we can get there, we can disappear, or maybe find someone who can help us clear your name." Serana raised an eyebrow. "You believe I am innocent?" Jackson nodded slowly. "I saw the fear in their eyes when they looked at you, not the kind you have for a monster, the kind you have for the truth." Next day, Jackson repaired the ship with scavenged parts. The fighter barely held together, but still flew. Serana helped, though her side ached with every move. Her fingers worked fast with tools she had never used before, and Jackson realized she was more than a warrior. She was smart, quiet, efficient, never wasting a word or step. They launched again, into the dark, moving silent through back routes and dead sectors, jumping through wormholes that stank of radiation and silence. The ship rattled with every pulse, and Jackson barely held it together, his eyes bloodshot, hands blistered from heat. Finally, they reached the outskirts of Crag's Hollow, a hidden station carved into an asteroid cluster, its lights flickering like a dying city, its docking bay full of rusted ships, and eyes that never blink. Jackson docked the ship and looked at Serana, her armor dirty, her body tired, but her eyes bright with fire. "Stay close," he said. "These people are not kind, but they might be useful." They stepped into the smoke and noise of the station, strangers in a den of thieves and killers, and as the doors shut behind them, Jackson knew the worst was still ahead, because they were no longer just fugitives now. They were a threat to the lie the galaxy was built. And threats never lived long in places like this. The bounty alert hit every dark corner of the galaxy like fire through dry grass, glowing red across pirate dashboards, echoing in bounty hunter networks, spreading faster than light, with one name and one face: Jackson Ward, Traitor of the Human Alliance. High priority capture, alive or dead, worth enough credits to buy a moon, and a drink on every table turned into a toast to the fool who ran with an alien inside. Crag's Hollow. The air was thick with smoke, oil, and lies. Traders shouted from broken stalls, mercenaries sized up newcomers with dead eyes and stolen guns, and above it all towered rusted signs flickering in dead languages. Jackson kept his hood low, face in shadow, walking slow but alert beside him. Serana walked like a ghost, her wounds hidden by armor, her presence sharp like a blade in a crowd of dull daggers. They passed a group of bounty hunters bragging about the alert. One waved a holly image of Jackson's face, others laughed, saying he looked soft, easy money. Jackson said nothing, kept walking, heart beating faster, every step like a hammer to his ribs. The station reeked of betrayal and blood, and he knew someone would sell them out the moment they smelled fear. They reached a hidden bar tucked behind a vendor selling scrap tech. Inside it was dark and quiet, the smell of engine grease and cheap drink thick in the air. Behind the counter stood a woman with silver eyes and arms of glowing circuits. Her name was Mara, once a soldier, now a ghost, living in the cracks of the galaxy. She looked up, paused, then sighed. "You picked a bad time to come here." Jackson sat slowly. Serana beside him, he whispered, "We need help, we need to disappear, and we need a contact." Who can crack Alliance data without asking questions? Mara studied Serana, her gaze unreadable, then leaned close. You brought the alien. Everyone's hunting. You have no idea. How many eyes are watching this? Plus Jackson reached into his coat, pulled out a chip, slid it across the table, proof of a military cover-up. Sealed files, hacked maps, orders with names and dates, showing how Serana was set up to die, not because she was dangerous, but because she knew. To which Mara took the chip, eyes flicking back and forth. She whispered, "You're both dead if this leaks. And I'm dead too, but damn it, if this is true, then the whole Alliance command is rotting from the inside." She called for someone through a back door, and a young hacker walked in, thin with glowing fingertips and nervous eyes. His name was Vex, barely out of his teens, but smart enough to break codes the military thought were untouchable. Mara nodded. "Let him work, but keep your heads low, and don't make noise for 2 days." Jackson and Serana stayed hidden in a dusty corner of the bar. Vex worked, non-stop, fingers dancing over cracked screens, muttering in alien code. Serana watched him quietly, sometimes helping him translate old Zarelian documents, showing patience Jackson had never seen in a soldier, but trouble found them faster than truth ever could. A bounty hunter with a metal jaw spotted Jackson near a market, recognized his eyes, called in a dozen others. They came armed fast, no warnings, no mercy. Jackson grabbed Serana's arm and ran the narrow corridors of Crag's Hollow, turning to war as blasters screamed through rusted air. Serana moved like wind-striking guards, with elbows and knees, flipping over crates, using every inch of space like a battlefield. Jackson covered her back, firing stun rounds, not to kill, just to get out alive. They ducked into a vent system, slid down ladders, crawled through heat ducts, and emerged behind the old scrapyard. Mara met them there, furious. "What the hell did you do? Half the station is hunting you." Jackson caught his breath, pulled Serana behind cover. "They found us. I don't know how, but they're not backing off." Then Vex arrived, breathless, wide-eyed, holding the cracked datapad. "I got in. I found the real files, not just the setup. I found the voice logs, the mission orders, the command codes. From General Rourke himself. He signed her death without trial, and covered it with fake footage. This changes everything." But before they could celebrate, a blast shook the ground above them. The door to the scrapyard burst open, bounty hunters pouring in, weapons raised. No time to run, no time to think. Jackson turned to Serana, eyes sharp. "We make a stand." She nodded once, then picked up a fallen blaster, and together they rose from the shadows, ready to fight, not just for freedom, but for truth, because in that moment, they were no longer running, they were resisting, and the galaxy was about to hear them roar. The scrapyard burned with fire and screams, metal cracked under the weight of chaos. Bounty hunters poured in like a swarm, but Jackson and Serana moved like ghosts between flame and wreckage blasters, lighting the smoke with blue flashes as Vex clutched the datapad to his chest, ducking under falling beams, crying out that the proof was inside, that if he died, the truth would. Serana grabbed Vex and threw him behind cover, then spun and kicked a hunter into a pile of old engine coils. Her moves, sharp and fast, like a blade dancing in blood. Jackson covered her flanks, reloading between shots, eyes scanning every shadow for another threat. The air was thick with smoke and lies, and betrayals. Suddenly, a transport crashed through the barricade. Mara, behind the controls, shouting for them to get in without waiting. Serana pulled Vex into the open. Jackson followed, and they leapt onto the flatbed, as Mara reversed the thrusters and roared away down a maintenance tunnel, barely wide enough for the ship, metal scraping, sparks flying behind them. The bounty hunters fired wildly, but the smoke swallowed them. The tunnel curved into darkness, and then burst into a hidden hangar buried beneath Crag's Hollow. Mara sealed the gate behind them, then turned and stared at Jackson, like she wanted to slap him and hug him at the same time. "You just turned the most dangerous place in the galaxy into a death trap," she hissed, but then her eyes flicked to the datapad in Vex's hands, and her anger turned to something colder, something harder. Vex connected the pad to a wall console, his fingers flying, his voice trembling as screens lit up with sealed files, voice logs, command orders, maps, and troop reports, all pointing to the same thing. Serana was never supposed to survive her mission, because what she saw was never meant to reach the stars. She had discovered a secret campaign authorized by General Rourke himself, a mission that targeted surrendering colonies for extermination. Dressed up as rebel purges, her unit refused to obey and were ambushed. Only Serana escaped, and for that they hunted hers. The truth unfolded across the screen. Serana stood still, eyes locked on the images. Her hands clenched, her voice steady but low. "They killed my brothers, they burned our symbols, they called us monsters, and silenced every word I tried to speak." Jackson felt the heat rise in his chest, not from rage alone, but from the weight of it all, the lies, the orders, the friends he lost on missions that never made sense now. He saw the pattern, the setup, the cruelty hidden behind medals and uniforms. Mara spoke slowly. We need to send this out now, broadcast it wide before they shut us down, before they find us again. But the station's comms are too slow. They'll jam the signal before it travels far. Jackson turned to Vex. Is there another way, somewhere stronger, somewhere deep? Vex nodded. One place, an old rebel relay deep in the bones of Sorex 9, abandoned since the last uprising, but still wired to the intergalactic net. If we reach it and plug in, the truth spreads to every system, every outpost, every fleet. They knew it was suicide. Sorex 9 was a dead moon covered in broken tech and crawling with scavengers, but it was there. Only shot, and time was closing like a fist around their necks. They took Mara's stealth ship, stripped down fast, but silent and cold as the grave. They flew blind through dark systems, dodging patrols and solar storms, sleeping in shifts, never speaking of the bounty or the death waiting in every shadow. When they landed on Sorex 9, the silence was absolute. The wind carried ash across the ruins of a war too old for memory, and above the sky swirled with lightning and static, like the moon itself. Remembered pain inside the relay station. Vines had grown through the walls, machines buried under dust and bone. Vex moved fast, wiping controls, rerouting power. Serana stood watch, eyes glowing in the dim light, her blaster ready. Suddenly a crackle. On the scanner, movement outside, not scavengers, but drones, military models, silent killers sent by someone who had been watching, someone who feared the signal, someone who knew they had come for truth. Jackson helped Vex reroute power, while Serana took the front door, firing without mercy. Drones burst apart, but more came, metal spiders crawling over the roof walls, shaking with impact. Data began to upload line by line, file by file, voice by voice. Serana took a blast to the shoulder, fell back, then rose again, eyes burning with fury, as she fought to the last step, never backing down, never letting the truth die. Vex shouted, "It's almost done, hold them just a little longer." And in the moment when all seemed lost, the final bar hit 100. The signal launched into the stars. The signal was gone, the truth was out, and for one breathless second, the war paused in the dark relay chamber. Vex fell to his knees, laughing through tears. Serana leaned against the wall, her arm dripping with blood, but her eyes still bright and alive. And Jackson stared at the console, watching the data shoot into space. Unstoppable, untouchable, undeniable. But silence never lasted long, not in war, and not in truth, and in the very next breath. The relay lights flickered, the power dropped, and a deep hum rolled through the floor like a beast waking up. Jackson spun to Vex, who froze wide-eyed and pale. "What did you do?" But Vex said nothing, only looked down at the tool in his hand, a sleek silver spike, blinking. "Read you. Set a trace," Jackson whispered. The words like a curse. Serana stepped forward, voice cold and sharp. "Why would you do that?" Vex trembled, eyes darting to the door. "I had to," they said. "They'd kill my family if I didn't. The Alliance, they knew I was helping you. They offered me a deal." Fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. "You sold us out after everything, after the truth." Vex stepped back, tears on his cheeks. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought they'd just take the data. I didn't know they'd send kill squads above them." The roof shook, dust falling in sheets as dropships landed outside. Boots slammed to the earth, metal roared, and the storm outside screamed louder than before. Serana raised her weapon, but her voice was steady. "He is not our focus. The truth is out. We leave now, or we never leave at all." They ran through the back corridors of the relay station, tunnels carved by ancient wars and newer lies. Vex followed behind, guilt heavy on every step, but Jackson had no time for revenge, only survival. The moon boiled with lightning, and fire gunships hovered above like vultures, engines humming with hunger, as squads of armored soldiers dropped in formation, weapons. Hot orders, clear. Kill the traitor, kill the alien, leave no witnesses. Mara's ship sat hidden in a canyon beyond the ridge, half buried in sand, camouflaged, but not for long. Jackson led them through the storm, guiding Serana with one arm, supporting Vex with the other. Every breath was a fight, every heartbeat a countdown. A sniper round cut through the wind, missed Serana's head by inches. They dropped low, crawled under twisted metal, climbed through shattered bunkers, and over cracked stone. One drone spotted them, worried to life, but Serana threw a grenade with perfect aim. The blast swallowed it and lit the sky like a second sun. By the time they reached the ship, the storm was a monster, wind ripping at their clothes, lightning blinding their eyes. Jackson opened the hatch, shoved Vex inside, turned to help Serana, but another shot rang out, and she fell again. Her leg high, pulled her up, carried her into the ship, and slammed the hatch as bullets punched the outer hull. Mara's systems blinked, online engines roaring, shields flaring to life. The ship rose through fire, and Static, dodging missiles, diving through the storm like a wounded bird with steel wings, and in the cockpit. Serana sat gripping her leg, her face pale, but defiant. Jackson turned to Vex. His voice a storm of its own. "You don't speak unless spoken to. You breathe only because we need your skills, and when this is over, you answer for what you've done." Vex nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Later they landed in the Outer Rim, a dead zone, where no signals reached, and no laws ruled. They set up camp in an old mining shelter, safe for now, but surrounded by cold silence. Serana sat beside the fire, her wound bandaged, her gaze fixed on the stars. "Above we are alive, but for how long?" Jackson sat beside her, his voice low. "As long as we have each other. And the truth is free, they cannot kill us all. And even if they do, the galaxy knows no." She looked at him, eyes soft and tired, and something passed between them, not words, not promises. Something deeper, forged in blood and betrayal. And far away in the heart of the Alliance, generals screamed orders, ships moved through space, and bounty alerts flashed red again, this time with a new name: Paxson. Ward confirmed traitor. Serana confirmed enemy of the state, and Vex now listed as missing rogue asset, to be recovered or destroyed. The hunt had just begun, but now they hunted with eyes wide open, and behind them the galaxy began to whisper their names, not as fugitives, but as legends. The camp was silent. The only sound was the low hum of the power cells buried beneath ancient rock, and the soft crackle of the fire. Jackson sat alone by the console, watching Static dance across the screen, trying for the third time to connect with someone, anyone, who would believe the signal had reached the galaxy. Because all they had now was hope, and a wounded silence. Serana rested near the wall, her head against the metal, her wound sealed, but her strength not yet returned, her breathing steady but shallow, as if every breath caused something heavy. Jackson glanced at her once, then turned back to the console, fingers tapping, slow and careful, eyes scanning encrypted frequencies, trying to find proof that someone had heard the truth, that someone had seen the files, that someone out there believed. Vex sat apart from them, eyes hollow, hands shaking as he worked on another device, the guilt still clinging to him like oil on skin, unwanted, but too deep to wipe away. He had tried to explain again and again, but the words meant nothing in the face of betrayal, and the silence that followed said more than any answer. Cliff. Then the console blinked once, and a message appeared, text only, cold and sharp and terrifying. "We are coming." Jackson froze. The words repeated again and again like a whisper from the dark. Then the power dropped, lights flickered, wind howled through the old tunnels, and the fire went out, leaving them in sudden, breathless cold. Serana opened her eyes at once, her instincts still sharper than pain. She grabbed her weapon, pulled herself up, and nodded at Jackson. Without a word he moved to the door, rifle ready. Vex looked at the device in his lap, then to the others. "I think they found the signal source. I masked it, but not well enough. They must have tracked it. They must have known. And now they want to erase it, like they tried to erase her, like they tried to erase the truth." Jackson growled under his breath. "How long?" Vex shook his head. "Maybe minutes, maybe less. They'll jam every signal, they'll flood the sky with static, and then they'll burn everything left outside." The wind rose as engines roared through the sky, dark shapes circling like wolves above wounded prey, shadows dropping between cliffs, armor shining beneath the moons, and boots crushing stone, as soldiers landed one by one, without sound, without mercy. Jackson pulled Serana deeper into the cave, helped her behind cover, then turned to Vex. "We hold them here as long as we can. If they take this place, the message dies with us." The soldiers moved fast, black armor, silent visors, glowing red, scanning heat, scanning movement, scanning life. Jackson fired first, the blast echoing like thunder through the tunnel, dropping one soldier before the rest returned. Fire-red streaks of death lighting the stone wall. Serana gritted her teeth, dragged herself up, and fired through the pain. Her shots clean and sharp, her voice low and calm, as if the wound meant nothing, as if the mission meant everything. Vex tried to upload the message again, tried to bounce it through hidden satellites, tried to find a gap in the noise, but the sky was locked tight with jammers, and every second brought the enemy closer. They fought inch by inch back through the tunnels, through old blast doors and ruined bunkers, Jackson's armor scorched with fire, Serana's strength fading with every step, Vex shouting for more time, but there was no time, only fire, only dust, only warthon. Serana stumbled her leg, giving out. Jackson caught her, lifted her without pause, and kept moving. Vex opened the final door to the core chamber, and they entered a space filled with ancient tech, forgotten machines humming with low-life cables, thick as arms, hanging from ceilings, and walls pulsing with faint light. Vex ran to the center, began the final upload directly into the ancient core. Bypassing jammers, using tech too old to be tracked, too strange to be spout. The soldiers breached the door, grenades exploding, metal flying. Jackson shielded Serana with his body fired into the smoke until his rifle clicked empty, then pulled another from a fallen guard and kept going. Serana pushed herself up, fired one last shot, and collapsed her energy. Gone, her breath shallow but her eyes still open. Still watching, still burning. The core pulsed once. Then again, then the screen flashed. Message sent. Vex cried out. We did it. It's done. It's in the deep net. Mirrored across every rebel node, every pirate link, every data ghost they can't erase. It now, not all of it. Jackson pulled Serana close, held her hand tight. She looked up at him, and smiled a small, tired smile. The kind that said it was worth it, the kind that made the stars above feel less cold. And outside, the soldiers paused as orders changed, as their mission cracked, as whispers spread across the systems, and the name Jackson Ward lit up screens, not as traitor but as something more. The stars above burned brighter now, not because they had changed, but because someone, somewhere, had finally listened. The signal had cracked the silence of space and slipped into the veins of forgotten networks. Pirate channels, rebel satellites, and ancient listening posts, and everywhere it touched, it left behind a question that burned hotter than any war.
Why did they leave Jackson?
Stood at the edge of the broken outpost, eyes on the night sky, hand resting on the hilt of his stolen rifle. The battle behind them had stopped, not with peace but with silence, the kind that follows truth, like a shadow too heavy to ignore. Serana lay on a cot in the shelter behind him, her wounds patched, her body still, but her mind alert. She watched the doorway. Like a guardian made of bone and fire, even in pain, she remained ready, because the war was not over, it had only shifted. Vex sat against the wall, head low, datapad on his lap, fingers stained with old blood, and code. The boy who betrayed them now, the one who carried the proof that saved them, and Jackson had not forgiven him, but he had chosen to let him stay. Because without him, the message would have died in the dirt with Vim across. The system's people were talking, not just rebels and outlaws, but soldiers and workers and officials who saw the voice logs, who heard Rourke's cold orders, who read the forged reports, and wondered if they too had become part of something evil. Dressed in duty, Jackson had no illusions. He knew the Alliance would not fall in a day. He knew that power this old and this deep did not break with truth alone, but truth was a crack, and through cracks came change. A ship landed just past the ridge, silent, sleek, and dark as night. Its ramp lowered, and a woman stepped out, tall, wrapped in rough cloth, her eyes hidden behind glass, her voice quiet and sharp. She said her name was Kale, and she represented those who had been waiting for this signal for a long time. She looked at Serana, then at Jackson, and then at the burned ground around them, and said, "You have made enemies, but you have also made believers. We can offer you shelter, we can offer you purpose, but we cannot offer you peace." Jackson did not ask for peace, he only asked what comes next. Kale smiled, not with warmth, but with fire. "We rebuild, we expose more, we push where they do not expect, and we make sure your message was not the last." Serana stood slowly, leaning on the wall, but her voice was clear. "Then we fight together, not as alien and human, not as fugitives and rebels, but as those who still believe in something better." Kale nodded and handed Jackson a small device. A signal key, a pass into the network that had once been broken, but was now waking up with fire in its blood, and names on its lips, names like Jackson Ward and Serana of Zyrel, not as enemies but as sparks. They boarded Kale's ship, not with fear but with purpose. Vex followed without a word, his face calm for the first time in days. The door closed behind them, and the engines hummed to life, lifting them from the ash of one world into the fire of another. In the control room, Serana sat beside Jackson, her hand resting near his, not touching but close enough that the silence between them felt full. Her eyes on the stars again, but softer now, like she could finally see a future in them. Jackson looked forward as the stars stretched into motion, his voice quiet but firm. "I am not a soldier anymore. I am not a traitor, and I am not afraid." In every corner of space where someone felt the weight of the Alliance, where someone lost family to hidden wars, or watched their truth buried beneath medals and uniforms, the message lived on. It said, "You are not alone." Said, "Truth is worth running for." It said, "Justice is worth bleeding for." And sometimes the greatest act of loyalty is standing against those who command you to be silent. Jackson Ward had saved one life, and in doing so, had lit a path through the dark for many more. And though the war would continue, though the bounty on his head would grow, though every step forward would demand more sacrifice, he walked it not as a hero, not as a rebel, not as a soldier. He walked it as a human.